Hi everyone, this is Luna here. Today we are talking about setting boundaries. So, where should I even start? To be really transparent and honest with you, it's something that I'm still working on and that I've been trying to work on for years. The reason is that I'm a huge giver. I love to give, which also means that I'm a people pleaser, big time. And years of, learning how to honor myself, how to love myself, how to respect myself have, helped a little, of course, but the truth is that I still struggle setting boundaries. I'm a yes to everything because I want everyone to be happy type of person. And unfortunately, this results as not being compassionate and loving towards myself. Actually, it's a form of even disrespect towards myself, towards my own being. And ultimately, it makes me suffer, it makes me feel bad, it makes me feel resentment as well. I feel a lot of resentment when I don't set my boundaries. Anyway, so as you understand here, setting boundaries is crucial. It's essential to our own well being and to our own health as well. So, people pleasing is saying yes to everyone, it's saying yes to everything. And I think that people pleasing is a topic that I can really dive into in another episode because this would take forever. But I will really focus on setting boundaries. I don't know about you, but from my perspective and from my own experiences, it comes from a lack of, actually a fear of lacking, even a fear of not being loved, a fear of not being enough, a fear of not being worthy, etc., etc. It really comes from these deep wounds that I developed as a child. And, I learned to say, to shape myself and to shape my schedule and to shape my life really in order to please people, to make people happy, to make others happy. But the truth is that I'm actually, in many situations, I've become unhappy and I've become sad even. And yeah, I got into very negative spiral, a negative spiral of thoughts and behaviors because of that. I don't know if you relate to that as well, but I also always think that if I set my boundaries, people will judge me or won't love me anymore. And actually, even if that happens, does it really matter? And it's not about, of course, it matters a bit from time to time, but it's not about what people think. It's not about others' emotions. And for a long time, I've been feeling responsible for others and for others' emotions. And it's really about understanding that our space is sacred. My space is sacred. And it's not even authentic or even honest to try to arrange things for others when we disrespect ourselves and our needs. So that's why we need to be clear. And the problem is that at some point, when we're not clear with our boundaries or what we need in the moment, we internalize, we burst, we explode. That's why we get burned out as well. That's why there is a lot of burnout traumas happening in the world right now. It's because we retain and internalize our feelings. We say yes when we mean no. And that happened to me a lot. I was always afraid of how I communicate my needs and boundaries. Because having a struggle with setting boundaries, and here again, I'm really talking about my own experiences, is that it's not really about setting them, because I know them deep in my heart, deep within me. I actually know them. When I connect to myself, when I tune into my heart space, I know my boundaries, but I express something else. And I don't know how to communicate my needs. I don't know how to communicate my limits. And that again comes from this lack of something that I've mentioned at the beginning of this episode. This lack of confidence, a lack of a fear of not being enough, etc. All of these fears gathered at the same time. And I'm scared to hurt others. So because I'm scared of hurting others, I'd rather just hurt myself and sabotage myself for others to feel happy and spacious and worthy. But I'm realizing actually that it's not even true. It's not even honest. Because by doing that, I'm not able to give space. I'm not able to give a true and honest space. I'm just giving on the superficial level. I'm just giving not even 5% of what I could give if I had my batteries recharged and space, inner space. And the real question we need to ask ourselves is, what is my truth right now? Do I try to shape myself for someone's needs? Or do I genuinely want to say yes right now? Do I have enough space? Do I have time? And I know that if you're a people pleaser, it's so difficult to practice that. It's so difficult to say the truth and to say I don't have time or I cannot do that right now. Simply because we think that by saying yes, we're doing a favor, but we're not. You're not doing a favor to yourself, so you're not doing a favor to others. Because at some point, there is this feeling of resentment that can bubble up. I just want to share quickly about a personal story. Basically, for the past 7 weeks, I've been with my family. So I spent a lot of time with my family. I was in France, and then I was back in Lisbon with my some parts of my family visiting, and I was with another part of my family in France. And before that, I was also with friends and clients and spent days with different people. And basically, it's been since the beginning of July, I haven't been alone once. Well, right now I am. It's been 3 days and it's been incredibly healing. But it's almost mid-September, and not having a time for myself the past weeks was really, really challenging. And that's why I'm coming here to talk about boundaries. And it's not just a me time that I'm lacking. It's being able to create my own schedule. It's being able to have my own plans, because when you are with people, which can be a beautiful thing, right? Connection and having to share your life, you share your share words, share moments with people, it's beautiful, it's magical, and it's needed, right? But when your plans have to fit everyone's needs at the same time, this is not possible. This is not something that your heart can handle. And I'm talking to myself mostly here, but also to all of you struggling with this people pleasing syndrome or just struggling with setting boundaries in general. And the consequences of trying to shape my life to please everyone are that I feel resentment, just like I mentioned before, and sometimes even anger. But I choose to internalize these emotions. So I say yes to everyone and everything. I put myself in situations that are unbearable, overwhelming, and self sabotaging at the end of the day. And the main reason is that I'm constantly worried for and about others, and I feel guilty if I disappoint people. And here's something that I'm learning: family and even close friends, they usually don't know your boundaries, because if you have never expressed them before, well, how can they know? How can they know where your limit is? How can they know that they've reached your limit and that you're about to explode? How could they know if you keep on saying yes to everything, if you've always said yes to everything, and then suddenly you feel angry, or you have to get this anger out of your system, and you behave in a way that is completely different than usual, for example, it means that they had no idea about your boundaries. So that's why communication is key. Communication is the main thing here. It's the main thing. And because your life is shaped in regards to what you say yes to and what you say no to. And the only person who can change that, the only person who can decide what is your yes and what is your no, is yourself. Because if you don't, people will do it for you. People already do it for you. So I decide at this moment to understand this pattern that I have after kind of reacting with a passive aggressive behavior not so long ago, a few days ago, with my brother, before being able to really express my concerns and needs. And I really realized that actually once I spoke, once I said things, well, it got clear. He understood. But at first, my first reaction was to get angry. At some point, I was exploding. I was bursting. And I was just like, I'm done. I am done. I am done now. And my reaction was a result of me just saying yes to absolutely everything for the past 7 weeks. And my poor brother had no idea about me keeping my feelings inside. So, and my body actually reacted before my words even came out of my mouth. And that's why it's important here, because it's a body poetry podcast. And of course, I'm talking about the body mainly, right? And how it feels in the body, is that you need to also realize that the body speaks, and that when you feel that you've crossed a boundary, or that someone else in your life crossed a boundary that you have, you can feel it in your body. You can feel the stomach pain, you can feel tiredness, you can feel fatigue, you can feel soreness, you can feel many different things. But the body always signals, and the body always reacts. So pay attention to your body. When you want to say yes, when you mean no, just tune into your body and try to see what it signals. Try to notice and observe what it says. And usually when, for example, I say yes when I mean no, I feel a blockage in my throat. and my self-expression, which is connected to my throat chakra. I will talk about chakras a bit later in another podcast. But, I feel a blockage and I just feel like I'm not expressing my truth. And that's what I want to really, or I would love you to realize here and to understand about boundaries, is that by not setting your boundaries, you're not being true. You're not being true to yourself and you're not being true to others. It's actually a form of lying. You're almost lying. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to others by not having clear boundaries. And I'm not talking about being rigid. I'm talking about healthy boundaries. Of course, there are always ways to be adaptable, and of course, there are always emergencies in life, right? But it's about knowing your everyday boundaries, knowing that your boundaries change throughout the day, throughout the whole week, throughout the month. They change. So don't be too rigid on boundaries. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to become a robot and just say no to everything and actually, have people get people out of your life. It's not what setting boundaries means. It means that when people know your boundaries, there's a form of respect, and it's a form of respect that you can also cultivate for yourself. When you have time for yourself, when you have enough time for your creativity, for your expression, for to nurture yourself, for a form of self-care. And I'm not talking about self-care, I'm not talking about exercising or healthy eating. I'm talking about just taking pure, honest breaths and just being able to create some time for yourself, even if it's just going somewhere, taking a walk, or just taking the time to do your own groceries, taking the time to do your own things. That's self-care, right? So what I've come to understand today is that setting boundaries is not a threat. It's not something that is or should be threatening. It's not something that is bad. It's not something that has to be rigid either. Actually, on the contrary, it is setting our boundaries that allow us to adapt to the others, and that the bonds also we have with other people can remain healthy and nourishing over time. It implies, however, not to set them randomly either, with humility and honesty, not after something happens, but when it's about to happen, right? And people will know, then others will know, you will know as well. In your mind, in your heart, it will be clearer. And in their heart and their mind, it will be clearer. And the way they react to your boundaries is not yours to take. The way they react is not yours to take. Whatever emotions the others are going through when you actually set clear boundaries are not you don't have to take them personally. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them directly. It has to do with their own traumas, experiences, and stories, but not yours. So I've just shared about emotional boundaries and mental boundaries, but there is also another one that is quite huge, which is the physical boundaries. And it's, my work around the body and the poetry of the body, the wisdom of the body. The first thing you want to connect to and trust is your physical layer. It's knowing when something happens, when something doesn't feel good, or when something feels right. And in order to explore these boundaries, these physical boundaries, you need to explore yourself. You need to know what feels good and what does not feel good. And this can be related to sexuality, it can be related to sensuality, it can be related to relationships in general, and also the relationship you have with yourself. So get to know yourself, get to know your pleasures, get to know the joy, where it comes from, how does it feel in the body? Where are you allowing touch? When are you allowing touch? When are you allowing a hug? Where are you allowing a hug? So these questions, they seem to be so simple, but actually they are so important when it comes to setting your boundaries. It doesn't even have to be related to sexuality. Of course, there's a big topic around that. But for example, I can just give the example of a hug. Once I was in a women's circle and I cried. I cried a lot. I had a lot of emotions coming out after the meditation. And when I was sharing about, my emotions, the way that everyone reacted in the circle was very overwhelming, and that was for me crossing my boundary. They all went to me and hugged me, and I had no space to receive a hug. I had no space to receive a hug, and at the same time I felt bad, and I was thinking, oh my god, I cannot refuse. They're all coming to me, I cannot say no. But I didn't want a hug. And so even that can be, a way of just disrespecting yourself or disrespecting the moment. And it has nothing to do with the others because they don't know. But it's about me being clear and maybe sharing a bit more loudly. Right now, I just need to have my own space and time, right after sharing my emotions. Just saying, well, right now, I just need to feel. And maybe the others would have taken it in a wrong way. Maybe, oh my God, she's so she thinks she's a diva or whatever because she doesn't want a hug. But again, it's coming back to the same question. Does it really matter at the moment? No, because what I need right now, what I was needing at the moment was just being by myself and just exploring my emotions, diving into them, and just being completely present with them. What I'm really trying to learn here is that boundaries are sacred, and that's the name of this podcast, Sacred Boundaries. Because boundaries come from my sacred space, which is my body. My body, with all of its layers, the physical, the emotional, and my spiritual layer, all of that know what my boundaries are. And so from that place, from knowing my body, from knowing my layers, and from knowing what they need, what they want, what they desire, and what they do not want, do not need, and do not desire, I can set clear boundaries. I know who I want in my sacred space in a certain moment of my life, and I know who I cannot give to or even receive at a certain moment of my life. So it's really about understanding and knowing your sacredness, your sacred space, your body. And again, I'm talking about the 3 layers here: the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual layers. I'm talking about this a bit more deeply in the first episode of this podcast, actually. So, of course, it's possible to set boundaries with an open heart. Setting boundaries is a practice, right? It can be learned, unlearned, redefined all the time. And I strongly believe that above all, it's an act of love towards ourselves. It's an act of love. And I'm learning that today, truly. I'm learning that. And it's when we love ourselves and others enough to say no with an open heart that honest relationships can be cultivated. And of course, it's not always a piece of cake. It's not always easy to apply that, right? So, yes, of course, I will always have this fear of harming others, or the fear of even being hurt through that process. I think it's something that's really anchored within me just because of, past experiences and trauma. But at the same time, it's something, I'm still learning and unlearning. And I just want you to know that not all of us are perfect, and not all of us can set clear boundaries all the time. We're still learning. So please forgive yourself for the times that you could not set your boundaries, or for the times that, are still difficult for you to set boundaries. You're learning, but at least you're aware. And maybe this podcast, or at least this episode, can make you a bit more aware of that. But there is that one last thing I really want to take with you today, is that you are not responsible for everyone's happiness but your own. And being able to set boundaries and being responsible of your own boundaries often becomes the trigger that encourages others to do the same. And in the end, it always comes back to the same thing. Before trying to save the world, start with being responsible for yourself. And I will end this episode of Setting Boundaries with a quote from Brené Brown that I admire and love so much. And she said, "Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others." I hope you can take that with you today. And if you have anything to share, please feel free to message me on Instagram, or to leave a comment on this podcast, or rate it if you'd like. It would mean the world to me to keep on growing and building this podcast. I would be incredibly, incredibly grateful. I send you tons of love and wish you a beautiful day.